Welcome to Aware. We are dedicated to communicating information that inspires your positive growth and change. Are you interested in a peaceful planet? Are you interested in optimal health? Are you living with purpose? Are you enjoying your life? We realize each person can make a difference, and our mission is to empower your awareness. The choices that you make in every moment shape your life, and we encourage you to realize that you have your own answers and to always listen to your own truth. We invite you to stay aware. Hi, I'm Lisa Garr, and welcome to the Aware Show. I am so grateful that you are here, and we're on our way to a journey today. So I'm going to ask you a question. Have you ever thought about just leaving it all, just leaving where you live, letting go of all your goals, and just moving to maybe another country? Maybe you could stay within this country, but where would you go? Have you thought about this? This is the story of Sadhvi Saraswati. She was planning on having a successful career upon her graduation from Stanford, and instead, Sadhvi found herself traveling to India, originally with her husband. She was not a seeker. She really just loved the food, and she thought, okay, I'll go and support my husband. But what she found was a calling, a deep, deep calling from the Mother Ganga River. And she is here to share her story of how she found grace and the divine, and that's really, really in all of us. So I invite you on this journey with Sadhvi and to learn about what it really means to listen to a deep, deep calling and to be of service. Welcome. It's wonderful to have you here.
Oh, I'm so happy to be with you, Lisa. It's such a joy.
Well, me too, because I think you are answering a question that's floating in the back of a lot of people's minds of what next? What now? Our world just went through a massive change, a massive pause, and it gave people an opportunity to stop. Remember that beautiful pregnant pause at the very beginning of COVID, and it was before we knew how deadly it was. It was before we knew our jobs weren't coming back, but there was a beautiful, beautiful pregnant pause in our world. Do you remember that?
Yes, very, very, very well. In India, we were under a very strict lockdown. Everything literally was shut down. And where I was at Parmarth Niketan, where I live on the banks of Ganga, it was extraordinary. It was silent. There was no one in the streets, no one anywhere, just the flow of the Ganga. And within a couple of weeks, the CCTV cameras that they had placed, for security in different parts of the city in the main areas started to capture images of elephants walking down the steps to bathe in the river in the places that are usually full of people, and elephants just roaming the roads, and so much else, wildlife, and it was extraordinary. It was so beautiful.
It was a moment. And the reason I bring that up is because it's not that way any longer, and our lives went back to crisis and chaos, probably even more than we even realize right now. And so I wanted to know, what was your life like prior to you taking this trip with your husband?
Wow. Okay. So my life prior to going to India really was a very interesting blend of two lives. And it's a blend that I think a lot of people listening probably experience in their own life. So there's one thread, which is success. I grew up in California. I came from a family of great privilege, great opportunity, a nice high socioeconomic status. I had access to really everything that we are told one needs in order to be happy. All of the opportunity, all of the education, all of the right clothes, the vacations at the right places. I graduated from Stanford University. I was then in the middle of a PhD program in psychology. Things were for all objective purposes great.
You were about
And
20, in your mid 20s
25,
at that point?
25. I was
Okay.
exactly 25 when I came to India. And it's not that I didn't have moments of enjoying and recognizing the greatness. I certainly did. I had lots of beautiful moments of love and exuberance and joy. But I also was really, really deeply suffering. I had been sexually abused as a child and was severely bulimic in my adolescence and early 20s. And by 25, by the time that we went to India, I had really found a place of management of that. I was not struggling or suffering from either of those on any kind of a moment to moment, minute to minute, or even day to day basis. And yet they really hung over my life as an identity. I was a survivor of abuse. I was someone who struggled with food. And so I had this whole psychological, emotional, mental identity around what meal times were like, around what I thought about, around what I needed to be aware of in terms of my own psychology, of how I moved through the world. I was also married to a wonderful man. And yet, as we know, relationship is a yoga, and we were very young. And so, in addition to the beautiful and wonderful moments of that, there was also struggle in that. And so, I had this very, very interesting blend of everything being seemingly perfect in terms of what I had, and yet my internal experience that was really far from perfection and really included a lot of stress and struggle and worry and anxiety.
Mm. And it's more of a coping that you had to cope with. You just had to cope, as many of us do, and you don't realize it's coping. You just find yourself managing your life and moving on to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And there's this undercurrent of not only stress, but that I'm not good enough. Something's wrong.
Yes.
I'm broken. There's a demon in my closet. There's all those things that go on, and that really, it pretty much rules every goal, thought, move you make. But it's very unconscious. It's deeply seated. So when you went to India, and why did your husband at the time want to go to India? What was his journey about?
He was on a spiritual path. He was deeply into spirituality, deeply into spiritual philosophy. And he was really looking for a guru. He was on a path of really wanting to get enlightened, and which is, by the way, really unusual and amazing for someone who's 25, 26. People say to me, God, it's amazing that you came to India, that you had that foresight. And I always say, I wish I had it. I mean, I wish in retrospect I could say, oh, yes, I prayed to God to show me something deeper, more meaningful, more divine. I had no idea that this life existed.
You said your husband was seeking a spiritual path. Is he American?
Yes, he's American, and that's why he very much wanted to go to India. Neither of us, of course, had ever been, but everything that he read directed him to India. So I agreed because, as I said, I was a very, very strict vegetarian. And having traveled in Europe and in South America, being a very strict vegetarian was really difficult, especially in places where you don't speak the language. And what I realized was, well, at least in India, I can eat well. They know what vegetarian means. You don't have to ask twice. You don't have to grill waiters about the sauce or the stock or the seasoning, or, they're not going to sneak chicken broth into a vegetable soup in India. Whereas you see that a lot in other places. So I said, yes, let's go. Just to be with him, to support him, because it was time to go traveling. And because I thought, well, I love Indian food, so at least I'll be able to eat happily.
So, how did you find yourself? And tell me the experience of the Mother Ganga. How did you find yourself to her shores?
So this was in 1996. It was September of 1996, and it was the days prior to Google. So there was no online research about what we were going to do. We had a 500-page Lonely Planet guidebook. And on the first or the second morning in Delhi, I opened it up and I said, Rishikesh. It just really was like that. I have always been a mountain person, a nature person. For me, the mountains are always my place of refuge. And so as I had been looking at the book, as I saw Rishikesh, it said mountains, the Himalayas, and this beautiful river. And I also was already a yoga student. And so it said mountains, river, yoga. And of course, it wasn't too far from Delhi at all. It was, less than 200 miles from Delhi. It was easy to get to. So it just seemed like the perfect place to begin our Indian adventure. So we head off to Rishikesh, and the entire city of Rishikesh is a holy city, meaning no alcohol is allowed, no meat is allowed. So if you read the descriptions of the different hotels, they all pretty much sound identical, right? AC room, non-AC room, vegetarian restaurant. They all sounded exactly the same. But for some reason, because of this beautiful grace and beautiful pull of the intelligence of the universe, I chose a hotel, the Green Hotel. I was an avid environmentalist already. I had already spent a long time volunteering with Greenpeace. So when we had to choose between seemingly identical hotels, I thought, well, let's stay at the Green Hotel, thinking that it meant it was going to be, some kind of an eco resort, rather than just that the walls were going to be painted this very kind of pastel-y green. So
well, wait, let me just ask you.
Yes, of course.
Sorry, I'm sorry to interrupt, but in Rishikesh and in India, all of India, are there moments of prayer during the day? Or is it specific to Rishikesh in that particular region that, as you said, it's a very holy place? Were you participating in that?
Prayer. I'm sorry?
Were you participating and eager to learn about that?
So I wasn't eager to learn much about anything. As I said, I was really not much on a path. I was really looking forward to being in nature, to exploring, to enjoying, to maybe doing some yoga, to eating some good food. But I was not on any kind of a quest that I thought I was going to be learning deeply on that level. And yet, rewind for just a moment. On the airplane on the way to India, I took a vow. I had a moment in which I said to myself, this makes no sense. You are not a wanderer. You are not someone who does things for very little reason at all. Here you are flying literally across the world to a place you know nothing about, simply because you can get good vegetarian food. When you can get good vegetarian food on your corner and good Indian vegetarian food on your corner. And so I had this very beautiful moment on the airplane where I said to myself, okay, if I don't know why I'm going, it means that there is a reason I'm just not aware of. Because even though I was not someone who would have self-identified as spiritual, I always believed in a divine plan. And therefore, there always was this capital P planner. And so I took a vow, and the vow was, I'm going to keep my heart open. I don't know why I'm going to India. Clearly, the capital P planner has planned something for me. The only way I'm going to come to know what it is if I can keep my heart open. So when we get to Rishikesh then, to the Green Hotel, I say to the clerk, how do I get back to the river? And it turns out, by the way, that this hotel, now there's lots of hotels right in the area where the ashram that I live at is, Parmarth Niketan. That's the name of the ashram. But at that time, there was only one hotel, and it was the Green Hotel. And so the pull of grace was so extraordinary. So we put our bags down in the hotel, and I say, I'm going to put my feet in the river. And that was it. I did not know that the river was holy even. I just knew I was hot. I was tired. We had come up from Delhi. We had crossed the bridge. And I just wanted to sit by the banks of the river. And I got down to the banks of the river. And something so extraordinary happened that 25 years later, I can barely speak about it. It was like a veil was pulled off of not only my eyes, but of every way of thinking, every way of knowing. And suddenly I could see. I could see the truth of myself. I could see my oneness with the universe. I could see the divine in all. It was this extraordinary experience that knocked me literally to the ground, and I was just sobbing and sobbing and sobbing. And I knew that this was where I needed to be. I knew that I had come home.
Did you have anyone around you? Was there, in this out of body type of experience that you had, did you have anyone around you that maybe helped you in this experience or assisted you in this experience?
Not at that time. Now, the banks of Ganga are full always of people meditating, praying. Oh, and you had asked about all of India. Yes, all of India is full of prayers, of devotion, of faith. But the banks of Ganga are very, very, very sacred and very special, and people come there to sit on the banks of the river. The Mother Ganga is seen as the goddess of liberation, the goddess who literally grants us liberation. So the banks of Ganga are always full with people meditating, praying, chanting their mantras, bathing in the waters. So there were people around, but there was no one with me. And when I had gone down, I had very consciously sought a kind of quiet place, thinking I was just going to sit with my feet in the river. So there was no one very close at that time. But several days later, I met a beautiful man inside Parmarth Niketan ashram. I had started using the ashram as a pathway to get from the hotel to the river because it was so beautiful and so clean compared to other
The
parts.
hotel. Yes.
And well, the hotel was clean, but the roads were not so clean, and the alleyways to get from the hotel to the river were not so clean. But the ashram was super clean and super beautiful. So I started walking through it, and I befriended a man who was probably in his 70s at the time, who sat in the temple area inside the ashram, and he spoke beautiful English. And we became friends, and he was the only one who really understood what was happening to me. And he said, wow, he said, you've had darshan, the beautiful sight of Mother Ganga. You've been so blessed. And he started talking to me about God. And he was the first person in my life I ever knew who talked about God. And I would go and I would sit with him, and he would talk to me about God and about Ganga and about prayer and about the soul. So yes, he was very much there. He wasn't there when I had the actual experiences on the banks of Ganga, but I would stop in frequently and spend time sitting with him.
Did those experiences happen often, or was it just the one experience? And I'd love to know a little bit more about the history of the Ganga and why they call her the mother of liberation. I'd love to know.
Sure. So the experiences kept happening, but it also was continuous. So if you could think, for example, of, let's say, an ocean, a normal level ocean, non-stormy seas, we'll call that baseline. Then you have a tsunami. That was sort of like what happened to me that first moment. But then if you say post-tsunami, the ocean level itself rose dozens of feet. But then you continued to have even waves on top of that. So my baseline had been transformed. My baseline was no longer what it had been. It was still in that experience. But then even upon that new baseline, there were moments in which it was even more than other moments where I just would burst into tears, or I would just be sitting there and the tears would just pour down my eyes. And it took me a long time before I even could speak about any of this. And all I kept saying, all I could find the words for was, it is so beautiful. Oh my God, it is so beautiful. My God, it is so beautiful.
What about your
So,
husband at the time?
I'm sorry.
What about your husband at the time? Did he go on his own journey? Did you part ways? How did that work out?
So at that time, the very first few days, he was in Rishikesh. We were in Rishikesh together. He was taking classes in yoga, in meditation, in philosophy. So he was fully engaged in learning a lot, as much as he possibly could in the days. I spent most of the days sitting on the banks of Ganga. Eventually, yes, we did part ways. He was drawn to other parts of India, to other journeys in India. And so he went on those. I knew that I was meant to stay in Rishikesh, and so I did. Ganga, though, coming back to that question, it's such a beautiful beautiful story. I'll try to tell it sort of quickly, but it's a really divine story. So there was a king named King Sagar. And in the old days, the way that kings would expand their kingdom was they would send out one of their horses. And it was just sort of accepted amongst the kings that if your horse wandered successfully across my land, that you now owned my land. That, like, if I couldn't keep your horse from wandering happily and freely across all of my land, then my land was yours. So kings would send out their horses to wander, to essentially take over other areas. And so King Sagar sent out his horse. His horse ended up, a long story, but we'll fast forward. His horse ended up in the hermitage of a rishi, a sage, a yogi. And the yogi spent most of his time in meditation. When the horse did not return, King Sagar became very worried, not just about the life of the horse, but because it's all about your power, your sovereignty, your kingdom. If your horse got captured, it means that then maybe somebody else is going to come and take your land and your whole kingdom is under threat. So he sent off his sons, tens of thousands of them in an army, to find and bring back the horse. When they see the horse in the hermitage of this sage, they thought that the sage had captured and kidnapped the horse. And so they became furious and they started taunting the sage who was meditating. His eyes were closed, but they kept taunting him and kept taunting him. And finally, the sage opens his eyes. And out of his eyes, the power was so strong that it burned all of King Sagar's sons to ashes. And literally, they just became piles of ash at the feet of this sage. So now King Sagar, of course, is panicking because not only has his horse disappeared, but his entire army of sons has disappeared. And he finally gets the wisdom, the knowledge that the only way that his sons are going to have their final rites properly done, because in India, the final rites are considered essential so that the departed one's soul can merge with the divine. So when he hears what happened, he becomes now very worried about the souls of his fallen sons. And he's told only if Mother Ganga, the goddess in heaven, flows in the form of a river over the ashes of your sons, only then will they attain liberation. So he prays and prays to Mother Ganga. Not enough. His son, after he passes, prays and prays and prays, nothing. The lineage of King Sagar finally ends with King Bhagirath. And King Bhagirath engages in deep, deep sadhana and penance. And finally, the goddess Ganga flows onto the earth in the form of this river to liberate the fallen sons of King Sagar. And she stayed, right? I mean, she came for that, but she stayed, and she stayed for us. And so that's where the sense of Mother Ganga as the bringer of liberation comes from. But it's also important to realize she's a goddess. She has come onto earth beseeched by the descendants of King Sagar in the form of this river. But ultimately, she's a goddess.
How wonderful. I love the level of tradition.
Story time.
Yes, I love the stories. I love the tradition. And I love that it stays. I love in India that the stories and the traditions stay and last. And they're honored, and they have to be honored by multiple generations because that's how they're going to stay. You don't find that tradition stays so much in America is more about progress and moving forward and moving on. And there's not a lot of emphasis on tradition in this country. There's more emphasis on progress. And so I do find that it's beautiful, these stories that last through lineages and that they're honored, truly honored. And I ask you that because, and I love that story because there is a way for us to maintain that level of tradition, for those practices that we honor, or those loved ones that have moved on that we honored, and we keep those practices and loved ones and traditions alive through our daily rituals. And that's something that we could learn from India and bring into our own individual lives, because it really honors the entire intention of everything, and it deepens it as well. So I would love to ask you, living in an ashram, what is your daily practice that you do in India? And do you carry it with you even when you travel?
Beautiful. Yeah. So it's an interesting thing about daily practice, because when I first moved to India, when I first knew this is where I meant to be, and when I kept having all of these incredible experiences of grace and that power of knowing this was where I was meant to be, whether it was hearing voices, literally I heard voices saying you must stay here, or getting my feet literally crazy glued to the ground and I couldn't walk out of the ashram. When I had all of these experiences and finally knew, okay, no joke, this is really where I am meant to live and to be, the first thing that I thought I was going to do, because I'm an academic, was I'm going to learn everything I can learn about India and Hinduism. Like, I'm going to become an expert on this thing. And I'm going to do what everybody else does. And it became really clear to me very early on that for me, the experience was not meant to be either an academic one or in many ways a very traditional one. That if I was simply supposed to learn everything there was to know about Hinduism, I could have done that very, very well living in the San Francisco Bay Area. There was no reason to be in Rishikesh to learn Eastern tradition and philosophy. If I was going to engage in a practice that didn't mean anything to me, but that was just following what others did, there would have been no reason to uproot my entire life to do that.
Mm.
And so from the beginning, I've been really clear on spirit of the law as even more important than letter of the law. And so I'll come to the daily practice in a moment, but I want to just preface it with the fact that, for example, I learned in the beginning that having a mantra is a very, very important thing. But my guru would not give me a mantra in the beginning. I'm not sure why. Sometimes it takes him a really long time to agree to give people mantras. Sometimes he gives them immediately. Somebody asks and he's like, okay, close your eyes, here it is. And I had to wait for 2 years. And I know many people who have also had to wait years and months and weeks. So as I was waiting, I made up my own mantra. And I literally just chanted my own made up English mantra every day. And I did that because I knew, okay, eventually I'll get the other one, the really, powerful Sanskrit one. But the spirit of the law is even more important. And so even if it's not in Sanskrit, even if it's not officially from the Vedas, my mantra was, I love you, Krishna. So I literally just chanted on my mala, I love you, Krishna, I love you, Krishna, I love you, Krishna. And I did that for years until he gave me the mantra. And when I first started doing what's called puja, which means rituals. Now, there's a whole science of puja. I won't go into it now, but it's a whole offering of the 5 elements, and they're offered with different mantras and in a very specific order and a very specific way. But I didn't know any of that. So I just would take my pictures of Krishna, of Hanuman, and I would put everything that I loved on them. So like I had this crystal that I really loved, and I would just put the crystal, and I would just kind of make things up because it felt important to be engaged.
Mm.
But I wanted to make sure that I was engaged from my heart. I could have very easily walked into the temple of the ashram and said, okay, teach me puja. I've got a good memory. I'm going to get this thing down pat. I'll learn all of the steps. But I didn't, because I really wanted to just feel it. So my daily schedule, I do have a daily discipline, but even 25 years later, I am really attuned to a spirit of it rather than a discipline just for discipline's sake of it. So my day begins very early. And I have a practice of chanting my mantra. I did finally get a full proper guru mantra, chanting of my mantra and meditation. And I then have a day full of service, karma yoga. So it's yoga meditation in the morning, seated on a cushion. I also still have a yoga asana practice, which depending on the season, depending on the day, depending on where I am, either is part of my early morning practice or, especially in winter times, later in the day. So I've got these on the cushion, on the mat practices. And then I've got in between those the yoga meditation in the world. And then in Rishikesh, every evening we gather for our beautiful prayer ceremony, the Arati, the lighting ceremony on the banks of Ganga. And after that, I lead satsang, which the word satsang literally means in the presence of truth or in the association of truth. And it's a spiritual question answer session where people come and they gather and they ask whatever questions are in their minds and in their hearts, keeping them from living in truth. And I feel very, very blessed to be the vehicle through which the answer flows for them. And then
Wonderful.
again, yeah, it's such an extraordinary experience. I've been doing satsang now, giving it for probably 12, 15 years or so, and it's just gotten more and more formalized, bigger and bigger. You know, the last several years it's been live streamed on all of our platforms, and it just for me is such a blessing to be able to get what I think I know out of the way long enough for real knowledge, that capital K knowledge, to actually flow through me, not from me, for those who are there, because I feel very much like the first beneficiary of that. And yes. giving satsang is just it's such a blessing.
Is that something that you have to be indoctrinated into, or is that something that you naturally that was gifted through you?
Yeah, it's definitely not something that you get officially sort of ordained into, it for me began on one day when we were sitting in satsang with my guru, and someone asked a question, and he said, Sadhviji. And I thought it was Sadhviji, comma, like he was going to follow it up with another instruction. And I waited and I turned and looked, and he had his eyes closed. He was in meditation. And I realized it was Sadhviji, period, as in, you answer this. And the only way that I was able to do that was to realize that I didn't know the answer. It was not an intellectual exercise. It was not writing a report. It was surrendering who I think I am, what I think I know, what I think my identity is, surrendering that into spaciousness, into emptiness, with faith and love, and grace just flows through. You know, in science, we say the universe hates a vacuum. And I've discovered that the same thing is true spiritually. If you create space, if you can free yourself enough of who you think you are, that's when grace flows. There's this wonderful story of the seeker who goes to a guru wanting enlightenment, and the guru pours him tea. And as the guru's pouring tea, he's pouring and he's pouring, and the cup is filling up, and finally the cup of tea is overflowing, and tea is pouring, you know, spilling out all over the ground. And the man says, stop, you know, the cup is full, can't hold anymore. And the guru says, your mind is like this cup. You are so full of who you think you are, what you think you know, what you think you need, that I can't give you anything. Until you drink the tea, I can't pour you more tea. And until you are prepared to let go of the stories, of the drama, I can't give you anything. And for me, Lisa, that's been just the most extraordinary teaching on every level of becoming free of the pain that I had suffered in the first 25 years of my life, of being able to be a vehicle, a vessel for teaching others. The only way to do any of it is to let go of that false identity, of the roles, of the dramas, of the story, of the history, and to allow a flow of grace. There's an intelligence in the universe, an energy in the universe that makes flowers open their petals to the sun, that makes trees know to grow sideways when they need to get sunlight, right? I mean, how amazing that a tree that's supposed to grow up somehow has the intelligence to know, I'm going to actually go in this direction instead. It's such an exquisite intelligence. You know, a dog chases a bird to the top of a building. The bird flies off. The dog does not jump. It knows I cannot fly. A caterpillar somehow knows how to become a butterfly. All of this intelligence, this grace-filled intelligence of the universe that we just have to open ourselves up to. But the only way to do that is to create space from who we already think we are, what we think we need, that somehow if I just could get this job or this raise or this promotion or this relationship or this many followers on Facebook, then I would be happy. As long as we
Yeah.
hold tenaciously to that, there's no space for the universe to come in and flow through
That's
us.
It's a beautiful teaching. I'm learning so much here about just the initial idea of opening your heart to what, as you were on the plane, to what could be. And going with the open heart is such a beautiful lesson because what you've experienced since then, you probably could only experience because you set that intention to go with the open heart. And all of this about surrendering and all of this allowing and creating the space for the universal flow to come in is such a beautiful teaching. I do have a question about a guru. And I have so many questions. I mean, I love how you use the word yoga as a practice that is not only a prayer, it's a meditation, it's a humanitarian act, it's a teaching. You use the word yoga in so many different ways and beautiful ways. I love that. And you even use the word marriage as a yoga. I love that. It's a practice, right?
Well, it is. And when we speak about karma yoga, which is a very common term these days, but it's misunderstood, and people tend to think of it only as kind of volunteer work, or one Saturday morning a month we go and we do karma yoga and we paint a battered women's shelter or we pick up trash from the beach, and that's wonderful. We should absolutely do that. We should do even more of that. But karma yoga, well, karma means action. That literally is what the word karma means, is action. Yoga, of course, means union. And so karma yoga is action that is rooted upon the awareness of union, of unity, of oneness. And so karma yoga becomes everything we do. It becomes how we move down the street, how we speak, our food choices, our choices of brands of shampoo and toothpaste and moisturizing cream and clothing and coffee and chocolate. Because everything has a ripple impact onto Mother Earth, onto our sisters and brothers across the world who play a role in the production of that item. It becomes how we treat our own bodies. It becomes every single action we do all day long. And interestingly, if you think that just sitting and not acting means you are somehow free of karma, well, in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna makes it very clear that we're always acting, and that not to act is also an action. So if someone falls down in front of me and I don't bend down to help them, that's an action.
Mm-hmm.
An act of omission is just as much an action as an act of commission. And so we are acting all day long. And anybody who thinks that spirituality is over here and action is over here, or meditation is here and action is there, has not understood either spirituality or meditation, because the awareness, the experience that we have in meditation of oneness, of connection. Well, if our meditation means anything, that awareness stays with us when we stand up off the cushion. If the prayers that we chant in yoga mean anything to us, it stays with us when we walk off the mat. If it's just exercise, it's calisthenics, it's aerobics. But if it's yoga, whether you're doing it sitting in lotus posture with your eyes closed, or you are standing on your head, or you are serving soup in a soup kitchen, or you're washing the dishes. If it's done with an awareness of union between you and the divine, you and the creator, you and the creation, then it's yoga. And if it's
So
not, then it isn't.
Action union. I believe that in my own awareness that our environment is going to be the next global pandemic. And I think that the environment was the initial reason that the universe was trying to get our attention.
Absolutely.
Underneath the global pandemic. And because we're so smart, we were able to fix it with the, vaccines and so forth. But the environment still never got the attention she needs. And I do believe that it is going to resurface again. And it's
200%.
going to be, it's going to be even more harsh because the first time didn't work. And so I'm feeling that this teaching that you have here around karma yoga, around action union, is that what you said it is? Action union.
Yes, literally. That's what it literally means, is action rooted in union, the awareness of union, or action leading to greater union.
That is perfect. That's beautiful. And that is a practice that I think we all can take on. And that's what I feel is the importance of your book. Yes, it's about your journey, but I feel that it's more about your teachings, Sadhvi. And that's what we really need to understand. This piece is so important about being in action, about the union that we have and our actions, every single action and the impact that it makes on our Mother Earth has to be embodied by every soul that walks on it and is the one unifier that we can create. It will not polarize us. It will unify us because we all participate with the gifts of Mother Earth at some point. Yeah, and it's a really important practice.
Absolutely. When the pandemic first came, I was saying that Mother Earth did what any mother would do who was totally exasperated by her children who refused to learn their lesson, which is send them to their room and tell them they're not allowed to come out until they learn their lesson. It seemed so perfect that literally Mother Earth had sent us to our rooms. And yet, as you say, tragically, although the pandemic thankfully seems to be getting better, we haven't learned that lesson. And it's going to be lack of water. The United Nations estimates that by 2040, we'll have only half the drinking water that we need in the world. And long before that, we are seeing whether it's issues of water, whether it's issues of air, whether it's climate change, whatever we're looking at, whether it's the Amazon, fires. I did a 2-week beautiful spiritual pilgrimage a couple of weeks ago here through the mountains and forests of California to raise awareness about our interconnectedness. And wherever we went, fire, 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 drought, devastation. And that is our yoga today. Karma yoga is the yoga. But what's also really important and very beautiful is there's 3 streams of yoga that we're given in the core teachings of the Bhagavad Gita, which is the yoga of wisdom, Jnana Yoga, the yoga of love, Bhakti Yoga, and the yoga of action, Karma Yoga. And while they're presented as 3 separate streams, it's very clear that the core teaching is that they weave together in each other as each other. And so what I would say is the most important yoga right now is the yoga that is the confluence of karma, gyan, and bhakti, of wisdom, love, and action, in the way that what we're doing is not frenetic, is not chicken with its head cut off, is not rooted in our own individual egos, but that actually is rooted in wisdom and is rooted in love. Love for the divine creator, love for the divine creation, love for ourselves, our capital S self, as that creation.
That is a beautiful teaching again. Well, I thank you so much. We've run out of time, but I could listen to you all day. I love this so much. And I encourage people to get the book, which is Hollywood to the Himalayas, or Himalayas, as you say. And it's a journey of healing and transformation by Sadhvi Saraswati. And I invite you into the journey of the book and into the journey of exactly what Sadhvi is talking about with wisdom, love, and action. Thank you so much, my friend. It's been an honor. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. It's been so beautiful to be together.
Beautiful. And until next time, I invite you all to stay aware.